D'Angelo, how about you? Can you think of a time when that stress in your life was blocking you from moving forward?
Yes, thank you. Similar to Andre as well, just not really taking on or you know tackling a lot of other people's problems. It's kind of my son was just born. Um, all my family is on the East Coast, so I was out here for about 2 years. He had without going home to see them, so I had to see my mom, my brother, my nephews. And then my son, when he was born, he had to spend a week in the ICU. He had complications with his blood sugar, and he couldn't. His heat wasn't rising, so he was super cold, and they had to keep him in the NICU. And at that time, I was also doing a project overtime. So I think for about a week straight, I was up till about 4 a.m. Either driving from the hospital to coming home working. And then one day, I got up to go to my room for I think I was take a shower or something. And I got right here to where the garage passed off, and I fainted. Like I didn't realize it. I just fell to the floor. My girl said I was shaking, and it was at a point where that's when I knew kind of I had to take a step back, and I just kind of called them, and I was like, hey, I need to take a week or two because that could have been the end right there. If I had hit my head wrong or one of those things. So it's just one of those things, man. I think as men and as Black men, and especially growing in the South, where traditional. The Bible Belt and this tradition that the man takes care of the family, it put an extra weight on me, thinking about my son, his mother, and then also my job. I didn't feel like I could succumb to that. I had to handle it all. Otherwise I would drop the ball on any one of them. But, eventually that stress just overloaded and, I completely shut down. So.
D'Angelo, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to throw a question to Patrick Ma in a second, but I just want to ask you a quick question, D'Angelo. Follow up. Did you feel any other physical symptoms in your body before you lost consciousness?
I was always tired. Always. It didn't matter. I was completely tired. But I was pushing through it because I was just chugging 5-hour energy shots.
Yeah.
I was out, and it was one of those things where I knew at the time, and I also had like a little shortness of breath because I just wasn't sleeping, and I was chain smoking, going to, all that. So I kind of knew, I felt it before it happened. Like anytime I would get up, I'd be super tired, super fatigued. And then, so yeah, I definitely knew the signs there, but it's kind of like one of those, I got to push through.
You had to push through. I wanted to touch on that a little bit. I'm going to throw it to Patrick. He's a physician assistant. So Patrick, I hope you can do a little follow up with us. A lot of times, and I don't know that you were having what's been called a panic attack, D'Angelo. The period of my life that I just talked about, that's how I knew I needed help. I was in my office, and I went from 1 minute, I had a kind of low-grade headache for a day or so, and I literally almost lost consciousness at my desk. And then that's when I realized something is going on here. Wound up having a whole battery of tests and found out my body was fine. I didn't have heart trouble or any of that. So then that's what took me to a mental health clinician's office. Patrick, can you talk about how that stress can really, you touched on it earlier, but man, we just heard a story about a young man that, literally lost consciousness because of the impact of stress. Can you follow up on that a little bit, Patrick?
Yeah, of course, Michael. And like I mentioned earlier, when you're really stressed out, your body releases cortisol, which your body treated the cortisol hormone the same as it treats steroid. Steroid is a type of medication that's given to patients who are literally dying or in really serious illness. So an example of that would be in COVID cases, when a patient is really tanking, they give them a shot of steroid. That's what they do. So when you're in that constant state of stress and chronic stress, it wears your body out. Isn't that really mind-boggling how, stress can impact not only your mind, but also your body? To me, I still don't know because the mind is still a black box to many scientists. But I think that one of the things that I notice when I'm super stressed out or feeling overwhelmed is my mind just go blank. I don't know if any of the panel can relate to that. I also have memory issues where I thought that I did something, but it turned out I didn't, or vice versa. It's your body signaling you that you are under stress and that you're not performing the way that you should be. And a plug to our Brother Be Well content, we have a lot of resources for the viewer at home and for our panelists as well. How to manage stress, how to prioritize, because I believe that when you're stressed, number one thing that you should do is pick a priority. What should you do right now? Just like Andre mentioned earlier, when he's stressed, he just needs to take a moment for himself, and that's the case for many people. However, for many others like myself, I need to prioritize my list and all of the competing deadlines and figure out what is important right now. If I don't do this, I'm going to be homeless, or I'm going to be, jobless, or something terrible will happen in my life. You need to be able to prioritize that first task and get through that task before you can go on to the next. But when there's are many competing deadlines, there one can easily develop a sense of being overwhelmed. And I know for myself, when I'm overwhelmed, I just stop altogether. I can't do anything just because there's so many things to do and I can't do anything. And it's very contradictory and counterintuitive, but that's just how my body works.
Well, it's important that we know how our own individual bodies work. And it sounds like you don't have that much uncommon with D'Angelo. His body shut down for him. And Patrick, it sounds like you just get a little bit ahead of it and you just shut down yourself. But it's kind of the same thing going on, I think. Malik, you're nodding. Does that tend to be a coping mechanism? You're a mental health clinician. Are those both more Patrick than D'Angelo, I think, there? But can you talk about some of the coping mechanisms from clients of yours, from consumers of yours, when they're kind of overwhelmed by stress?
I mean, yeah, exactly what Patrick was saying is actually really, really common when you are in a state of where you are extremely overwhelmed, and it's just like it goes from I'm overwhelmed, I have so much to do, to I can't do any of this. And you look at it and it gets you to the point of like, okay, now you might start feeling different symptoms. You can go into moods of depression because of the feeling of stress. And that's the thing with stress. Stress doesn't usually live by itself as just being stressed. It usually has other emotions tied to it as well, whether that be anger, for any type of anger or frustration, or whether it's sadness or depression. Those things exist with being stressed. And also, I was doing a lot of nodding because, Patrick, I'm the exact same way. Even when I feel like I am so overwhelmed to where I cannot do anything, like I don't. I look and I'm like, this is too much for me right now. And I shut down. And it's not necessarily a healthy thing to do, but it's also not healthy to overextend myself either. So that's the thing, finding that, and that's what balance is all about. How do we find a balance to where we don't have to get overwhelmed? And that's an extremely hard thing to do, don't get me wrong. But what is important is for us to start identifying how to create a balance in our own life so that we don't get to the point to where our body is forcing us to shut down, or our mind is forcing us to shut down before our body does.
I just want to touch on, I want to be in the Patrick and Malik club. I wish I knew how to just shut down. And I do the opposite. I think it was you, D'Angelo, you just power through. I'm not from the South, but my dad was. So maybe that's where I got it from. I mean, my father, worked in a paper mill for 38 years before he finally retired. I watched that man go to work with a broken foot for 2 straight days. And so he broke his foot one day, came home, went to work, came back home the next day, couldn't even get his boot off. His foot had swollen up so bad they had to cut it off at the hospital. And I remember the doctor saying, "How did you walk around for 2 days on a broken foot?" So I think subliminally, as a little boy, I said, you just got to power through. So I wish I could shut down. I probably wouldn't have high blood pressure right now if I knew how to shut down. I just want to touch base before we look at that second video. Devontae, Andre, are you in the shutdown club? Is that a technique? Malik said it's the most common response. So I'm curious, maybe Andre first. Is that your technique? Is that the way that you kind of deal with that overwhelming stress that we all have to face sometimes?
Yes, I am at that shutdown stage, but I'm also into that prioritized stage. So when I shut down, I don't let it just be a dead period. I shut down and say, why are you shutting down? What do you need to do? Wow. And that's how the only way I can really push forward with it.
at our second video. We've got Grace Cecilio. She's our resident Brother Be Well mindfulness expert, another incredible spirit. And she's got a video for us that's going to show us how to connect with nature as a way of kind of managing stress. So here's Grace Cecilio. Take a look. We'll be back in a sec.
Hey, it's Grace, mindfulness expert here at Brother Be Well. When was the last time you went outside? Really went outside, not just to go somewhere, but to spend time in nature. Sitting by a tree, sitting on the grass, or just allowing the sun to touch your face. All of these natural elements have such power within them. Think about how healing Mother Earth is. It gives us medicine. It allows our mental space to clear every time we step into it. But living in cities can really limit our exposure to nature. We were not made to sit inside. So I challenge you to spend at least 10 minutes sitting next to a tree or just sitting in the sun, maybe on the sand. Notice what it feels like to place your feet barefoot on Mother Nature, dirt, grass, sand, whatever, and wiggle your toes. I know it's weird, we're not used to it, we like shoes, but try it. There is a grounding element when we put our bare feet on the ground. Even touching it with your hands can help feed in that energy into your body. It's healing, it's powerful, but you need to open yourself up to receive its benefits. So the next time you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, especially, try going outside and notice how that might shift your mood. It's here for a reason, and Mother Earth will serve us if we let it. I'm Grace, and remember, brother, be well.
My brothers, you get to see now, Grace, we've seen two sisters who support our work at Brother Be Well. We call them honorary brothers with Brother Be Well. Grace, I feel like she's in my head. I tried just before this production to get outside, and I didn't have time to do that. But I also felt like she was in my head because I'm not one of those people that like shoes. I frankly would go barefoot all the time if I could, and I get energy that way, and it just kind of calms me down. I want to open it up to you, maybe Richard. We haven't heard from you in a second, so we'll start with you, Richard Toledo. What are some of the ways, first of all, are you in the Grace camp? Do you enjoy nature? Do you use that as a way to kind of de-stress? And if not, or so, what are some of maybe the other ways in which you manage stress?
So yeah, I actually love nature. Nature is what reduces my stress all around. Whether I could go to the beach, I could go to a forest, and it just calms me down because of the silence. Maybe not so much at the beach because the currents, but in the forest, just listening to the birds and just so quiet, things that you can't get in a city such as Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so that is very, very soothing. I actually took a 1 week road trip this year in August, and I went up Northern California, San Francisco, Santa Barbara, went to Reno, Nevada, came down to Las Vegas, and it was very relaxing. Something that I would want to do again. It tired me out because after a whole week of not being in the house, it does get a little exhausting. But although I was exhausted, it was just a physical exhaustion, but my stress was nowhere to be found, which was